The Asus ROG Phone is one of my favorite lines of phone because it's so darn playful and it's all about gaming, so it's got to be, but it pushes about out when it comes to design, accessories, and so much else. And so when I saw the ROG Phone 8, there was a tinge of disappointment because this is the first time that Asus has decided to streamline, mainstream the ROG Phone line. But the more I've looked into it, the more I've realized it's probably the right decision. I'm Basil, you're watching TechEdit. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, please do. It's how you stay on top of everything we do. If you haven't figured it out already, this video is all about the ROG Phone 8, introducing why this phone actually makes so much sense. The most obvious mainstreaming with regards to this phone is the design. For better and for worse, there aren't any front-firing speakers, for example. There's no notification light, and around the back, the screen is gone, but instead you've got this dot matrix anime vision display. That's what Asus calls it, and it's a really fun take on keeping that gaming phone grunt alive looks-wise while still retaining a very, very slick finish when it is off. In fact, slick kind of sums up the finish around the back of the phone. It has a satiny feel. It's glass, so it does feel premium, and that curves nicely into a metal frame. Rounded corners, so while it's a big phone, 9mm thick, it still feels manageable. Being a gaming phone, connectivity is a really big deal. Ports, accessories, etc. And so I'm going to talk about that now. You've got two USB-C ports. One's on the left-hand side, and that's going to attach an aeroactive cooler that ships in the box with the maxed out version, but you have to buy it separately if you pick up the standard version. There's a second USB port at the base in a standard kind of charging port position, except it's a little bit to the left, so it's not quite centered. That still means this thing works with the Backbone 1 controller, for example, which last year's ROG Phone 7 didn't. It was too big. So because the screen and the front generally doesn't have those front-firing speakers, there are smaller bezels, and so this thing is a little bit shorter. This could be the first ROG phone, and in fact gaming phone, with a really good camera system, because it's got a big old camera bump, and that's usually the first sign that you've got a good camera. It's got a primary 50-megapixel camera with an IMX890 sensor. That's 1/1.56 inches, optical image stabilization with a twist. It's the gimbal stabilization system from Asus that it introduced on the Zen phone series. 6-axis stabilization, pretty impressive. The fact you're getting it on a gaming phone is very cool. You've also got an ultra-wide camera. Sadly, no autofocus here, but there's a 3x telephoto camera with OIS. So as a package, it's really complete, more complete than any other gaming phone on the scene. I'm excited. The display is a 6.7-inch Full HD Plus panel, and it's a flexible OLED, and what that means is even though it's not curved, it has really, really narrow bezels around the frame. It's got a punch hole camera as well, so a big change from what we're used to seeing from Asus's ROG phones. That still looks very, very good, even though it isn't the sharpest panel on the block, and with a 165 Hz refresh rate, it absolutely glides. Content just flows across here when that's set to maximum. When you're gaming, obviously, most games will cap out at around 60 frames per second, Genshin Impact, for example, being the obvious one. But Asus has this thing called Armory Crate, which has historically made it very easy to access high refresh rate games by listing them out for you. So really, really convenient. Armory Crate's also going to give you loads of in-game options, which we'll cover in the full review. There's an in-display fingerprint scanner here, and there's a 3.5mm headphone jack for wired audio, but audio has taken a hit when it comes to the aeroactive cooler. This time around, it doesn't have that subwoofer attached, so this thing probably won't turn into the portable speaker the ROG Phone 7 will. You've also got a smaller battery. It's 5,500 milliamps versus the 6,000 milliamp battery in past ROG phones. How that's going to translate, I'm not so sure. Is it concerning? I wouldn't say so unless you plan on using the aeroactive cooler a lot. From past experience, that's the thing that drains the ROG Phone battery quicker than anything else. And so if you game intensively, it might be an issue. What the ROG Phone 8 does bring back are the air triggers, which are the buttons on the side of the phone when you're gaming. It's an L and R trigger, for example, and they're just touch sensitive strips, and you can either tap them or swipe across them, inputting in multiple different ways. Asus mentioned when we were briefed on this that it's also got some cool new features. For example, tool. It can tap you into a kind of OCR, optical character recognition tool, so I can screen read what's going on, and I can pull words from a game and then drop it into a browser and search for it. So if I'm playing Genshin Impact or I'm looking for a certain material, I can throw it into Google and by just copying it, and all within the game without leaving the game. And so I can find out locations of specific items. This kind of stuff is what really sets the ROG Phone series apart, and has done so since I started using it. It's that really geeky, thoughtful stuff. You can input macro controls. You can also have game-specific macros. Again, with Genshin, you can have it perform all the super attacks without you having to press any buttons, because it just knows where to tap. Haven't tried all that out just yet, but can't wait to. It's the geeky stuff that makes ROG phones worth having. And the other thing that makes ROG phones so darn ridiculous is how specced out they are. Obviously, this thing has the latest Qualcomm Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 chipset inside. If you pick up the standard version, then you're going to get 16 gigabytes of RAM with 512 gigabytes of storage. And if that isn't enough for you, the Pro version has 24 gigabytes of RAM and 1 terabyte of storage. And that's the version I've got here. So it's enough phone, enough storage to last you pretty much a lifetime, but definitely years and years of use. So that's a quick introduction to the ROG Phone 8. It's a gaming phone with a difference, but also a ROG phone with a difference for the first time in a very long time. For a more in-depth review, stay tuned to the channel, subscribe. That will be coming in the coming weeks. Hopefully you enjoyed this video though. Thanks for watching.